Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. This is part 2 of our two-part JCL V2 cockpit review, known as the setup portion of this review. Here we will go over mounting the pedals, the steering wheel, shifter, and seat to our already built JCL version 2 cockpit. So let's get to it. This is the pedal set that I'm going to be using for the JCL V2 mounting. And the reason I'm using this is because you can see how laid back these pedals are. And if I was a user who had a set like this, I want to test the tray's tilting properties and just see how far up I can get these as far as the way I like them. I like them pretty much straight up and down with maybe just a little bit of angle on the back. Now, we'll be mounting them to the tray with these two holes here. And these are 6 mils. And very cool in the kit, they actually included a few of these 6 mil bolts, cap head screws if you will, with washers on them. And all we got to do is screw these into the silver L brackets we have already on the cockpit. But first, we have to measure our center to center hole width here so we can adjust our brackets accordingly before we go over there and mount it. And when I measure it, it looks like it's 235 millimeters, and that's on center for these holes. So all we got to do is go over to the cockpit and get those brackets, the holes on those brackets rather, at the same distance, and we should be ready to go and get these mounted. So that's what we'll do next. Well, we actually had to move these two brackets here from the other side of this profile, from the stock setup that I put it in according to the directions, which again is the great thing about using profile, because we can move this stuff anywhere we want to accommodate just about any pedal set we could ever imagine. So I've already taken these and spaced them out to, I think it was 235 millimeters, and that was the centers when I measured them on the bottom of this pedal set that we're going to use. So we'll go ahead and put that up here. And one of the side benefits of this pedal set is if you look down underneath, or actually, I don't know if you guys can see that, but down here where the pedal is, you can actually see the screw hole that we need to get the bolt into. So we're going to go ahead and set these up, which makes it easier to look down behind this pedal, almost like cheating, and find the hole we need to actually put our screw through. And I can see it there. And this cable, because it's got a cable management system on the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and just tuck that away so it doesn't interfere with anything as we are mounting this pedal set. Right, so now what we've got to do is kind of find our holes and get them generally lined up. And we're going to use our 6 mil cap head screws and see if we can get these things on here. That's looking pretty good. I have to jiggle it around a little. There we go. Got one in. Oh, this is just too easy, isn't it? The other one to go. Kind of jiggle it a little bit just to get these things started. And that's good. And we'll take our 5 mil hex head driver and go ahead and tighten these down. And again, I always like to rotate tightening things down because you don't want to get one side in a bind. And because we can see the holes in here, I can actually see the depth of the screw and gauge my effort from that. All right, this is going on really well. I got a feeling this is going to be nice and stiff. Of course, I don't want to put too much pressure on this because, you know, this isn't the most robust pedal set in the world, but it is, wow, that's really nice. I don't think I've ever had this Thrustmaster T3PA GT set mounted as firmly as this. Wow. Of course, the pedals are kind of high, so we're going to have to see where my seat, I might be in an F1 position, which is not a bad thing once I get my seat mounted. So we're going to just have to see how that works out. But right now, this really feels good. Really nice. I like the way this is set up, and I like the angle that you can get them. You can see them now in the camera. This is really more of a straight on angle now for our feet to hit these pedals. So when we come back, we will actually be doing, I'm going to go ahead and put the motor on, which is going to be a Thrustmaster 3300. We'll get to that next. So this is the wheel we're going to mount, a T300. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with this motor. And I'm going to do the same thing I did to the pedal set. I want to measure the centers on here, and then we'll adjust our brackets over there to match it. It looks like 135 millimeter center to center. And the reason I'm using this, because as you know, with the stock configuration, if you bolt this to a desk, it's got a very high rake on it as far as where the wheel is located, which is fine if you're sitting at a desk and you're higher than the desk, and it's just just the angle it comes at. But what I'm going to do is we're going to be able to hang it over a little bit, but we're going to mount it on the bottom and try to get the wheel obviously at a better angle for our driving experience instead of being way up in the air where we can't get a good handle on it. So we'll see how that works out. Now we know we got 135 centers on this. We'll go over and adjust the brackets on the adjustable motor mount, and then we'll get this puppy mounted up. Now we have our T300 mounted, and I have about, I would say about 10 degrees. You can see over here on this bracket, it's kicked up a little bit, and it looks like about 10 degrees downslope to give me the angle that looks like it's going to be proper once I have my seat installed on this rig. Of course, I can still slide all this back and forth as needed, including the actual steering support itself, which isn't bolted down completely yet because I think I'm going to have to move it to fine tune it once I get my seat into the position it needs to be in. And I'm also probably going to use different profiles for my seat also, but we'll get to that when we get there. So we're going to take a look at mounting the seat, what we're going to have to do that when we get back. Because my JCL V2 Cockpit did not come with the seat rails, which you have to order extra for that stuff, but I already had some profile and I plan to use that anyway. But I did find out it's not going to be just a straightforward connection to the existing JCL profile. If you watched my first video, or the part 1 where we did the build of this cockpit, in the final thoughts there, if you watched that, you would have seen that we had run into a bit of a, well, not an issue, but a discrepancy as far as their JCL's 40 series versus the industry standard 40 series. In their 40 series, the gap in here is wider than it is in a regular 40 series. Here it's 8.13 millimeters, but that can vary a little bit as you go down the channel. On JCL's custom or proprietary profile, theirs is actually 9.91, or almost 10 millimeters wide. So that means we have to use their T-nuts, which have a wider groove. Let me show you a comparison here real quick. Look at them side by side. This one is for the industry standard profile, 40 series, and you can see that theirs, 40 series, is a bit wider. You see the grooves there. But the thread is all 8 mil, so we can use the bolts anyway. So also that brings into the issue of if you have anti-rotation tabs on your corner brackets, which we do here, but not on this side, they're not going, this is the industry standard piece here, and you can see it moves around a bit compared to the JCL custom brackets that they make, and you can see it fits very nice and tight there, the same way that the 40 series fits on a industry standard 40 series profile. So that means, again, if you want to add something custom to your rig, you have to go from their proprietary 40 series to the industry standard 40 series. Then you have to just play with things a little bit. We can make it work, but it's nicer to have, I guess, if I was going to buy one of these and know I was going to keep it for a long time, then I would probably, at the same time I bought it, what I would probably do is go ahead and buy some links of 40-40 and 40-80 profile, maybe 1600 mils a piece, and then I could cut it at will when I needed it to make whatever custom adjustments or add-ons I wanted to my cockpit. And maybe get, 10 or 15 of these brackets along with the corresponding T-nuts. But again, as I said in the other part of, or rather in the part 1 review, this is really not a deal breaker. It's not that much more, they're about the same as price. I priced out 40 series and their 40 series, and it pretty much is a wash. It might be a little bit more expensive for a bracket here and not on the other side or something like that. But what would make a difference is us being in North America, he's shipping his stuff to us from France. The shipping is probably going to be more than if I just went down to the 80/20 eBay store and bought some standard 40 series profile and hardware for it, because the shipping obviously is not going to be as much as coming from France. So that's probably where the cost difference would add up. So anyway, just want to point that out again. But what I'm going to do here is, because I'm using these profiles and I'm going across a 40/80 piece sitting back there on the cockpit, and you'll see that when I do this, it's kind of going to be sitting on top. But for this demonstration, I'll put this on top of the profile, kind of reversed. And I'm going to use this 40 series bracket, and I'm going to put the anti-twist tabs in the industry standard piece of 40 series. And then that'll back right up to this piece. And then I'll have the JCL T-nut in the JCL profile and the standard 40 series T-nut in this profile. So everything will kind of work. And you really don't need the anti-twist tabs for these brackets to work. So it's not that big of an issue, but something you should be aware of when you're looking at the JCL cockpits. Right, so now that we got that sorted, we're going to go over to the cockpit now and get these mounted with using these brackets, and they're going to be down low here like this, or actually something like this maybe. Anyway, we're going to have these mounted so that they're holding my brackets up, and then we'll talk about getting the actual seat brackets mounted to these. So now we've got our 40 profiles mounted to our JCL 40 profiles, and we got one of my seat brackets slid in on top of it. Now this is a bit longish, so I would actually, of course, cut this a little bit if I was going to keep this forever. But this is just for demonstration purposes, so I'm going to leave it the way it is. And you can see everything is setting up really nicely here. These brackets work fine, no issues. We got again, like you saw before, if you saw the previous segment, we're using the JCL T-nuts in these guys, and we're using regular 40 profile or industry standard 40 profile nuts in these. All right, so doing the same thing up here. I've just slid in some bolts in there, and then we slid the whole bracket forward. And on these brackets, I want to show you real quick. I'm using these hex head instead of a cap head hex bolt. I'm just using this 13 mil bolt. And the reason is, when you get a seat inside your bracket, a lot of times you're not going to have enough room to get an Allen wrench in there and try to turn it and tighten it down. So we just use regular flathead bolts in there. Just something to note there. So we'll go ahead and slide this in. I can not hit anything. Okay. Well, you gotta love 80/20 when everything is at the right length and everything slides in easily. All right. So next, what we'll do is we'll come in and I'll bring the seat in and set it down between the brackets, and then bring these pieces right here, and I still have them loose so I can move them. And I'll bring these pieces in to where they need to be, so when this is bolted down, the seat is sitting where it needs to be to bolt in between these rails. So when we come back, I'll have the seat sitting in these brackets and bolted down, and hopefully everything's going to look great. So now we have our Sparco seat mounted, and we've got a nice stiff mount here, very stiff. It's going to work out great. This really works out great. I did have to push the steering wheel mount further back, and that's okay. I've already got my trackball mounted over here on the mouse pad, and let's go ahead and sit in it, see how it feels. I have to take off my little wireless thing here so it doesn't get squashed in the seat. All right. Oh yeah. Yeah, this is yeah, this feels really good. Wow. This is going to be very comfy. This is a great position for me too. You can see how my rear end is about the same plane as my heels are, which is what most people would consider an ideal driving position. And this is just such an easy thing to dial in, these 80-20 rigs, and the JCL V2 is no exception to that rule. This really feels great. So yeah, all we have to do now is get a little shifter over here so I can do some sequential shifting. And of course you really don't need that with the paddle shifters, but I'm going to go ahead and mount one anyway. I think I've got a HE Husingveld sequence, or rather sequential shifter I can put on this. So we'll go ahead and get the shifter mounted. It's pretty simple. We're just going to put a couple of T-nuts in this bar over here, that you see over here, and then just bolt it up, and then we'll be good to go. So we'll see what that looks like once we're done. All right, so now we have the Husingveld sequential mounted, and of course that was just a couple of T-nuts and 6 mil bolts with 5 mil heads on them, and it's working just fine. It's amazing how quiet this sequential is compared to, say, my ProSim Lite. This is the one you can sneak up on people. Very cool. So now we got the shifter mounted. That's really the last piece of this configuration. So now what we're going to do is hook everything up to the computer. We're going to wheel our monitors over here and drive this thing, see how it does. Right, so we're actually driving the rig now, and at this point I'm using a T300 RS wheelbase and a matching T3PA pedal set that I'm actually doing another review on. I thought I'd throw those on there while I was making this video, just to see how everything went together and the differences between these sets of pedals and wheels compared to the Bodner and the HPP pedals. Well, there's no flex in this frame. It doesn't matter which set you have on here. The only flex you're going to feel when you have a Thrustmaster like this on there with the matching pedals is going to be the actual flex in the wheel motor housing itself and the pedal housing itself. When I have my Bodner wheel on here, no problems whatsoever with flex, and same thing with the HPP pedals. Just this thing is just solid as a rock, and it kind of surprised me because it's a very lightweight frame. These proprietary JCL extrusions that they use, and when I first saw it I was thinking, wow, this is 40 by 80 for the main frame, and it just didn't seem like it was going to be a very stiff cockpit once it was finished being built. But it is. There's just no flex anywhere in this thing. And I think that can be attributed to the really nice tight-fitting powder-coated brackets that match the powder-coated channels, and also these massive brackets that you can see in this shot, at least one of them, that they use for the wheel motor mount assembly, that box assembly there. It's just no flex whatsoever in that. It is just solid, but it's also so feathery light feeling. It's kind of strange because usually you'd think that you would need something heavier to really give you that nice solid feeling when you're sitting in a cockpit, like the Simlast P1 or the Husingveld GT1, I think it is. They're using these massive 40 by 160 profiles for the base of their cockpits, and of course you know that's going to be stiff because it's massive, and mass goes hand in hand with a nice solid stiff cockpit. But JCL's pulled it off with this one. With the way they use their bracketry, it just makes sense, I guess. And it's very, very stiff. Never had any problem of any flex anywhere. And like I said many times in videos, I just really do not like any flex in any of my mounting services or driving services when I'm racing or driving a car in simulation. It just doesn't feel natural. So, what do I think? Well, you could probably tell with this nice powder-coated finish and the brackets being black, it's a really handsome looking cockpit once you finish building it. So what we'll do now is go ahead and get to the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the setup portion of our JCL V2 cockpit review. I really like the way this pedal tray inclines, enabling the user to get the proper rake on their pedals no matter what set they're using. It allowed me to set these laid-back T3PA pedals into a proper GT position. I was able to get my shifter in a very comfortable racing position with, well, minimal effort. And the motor mount allowed me to get a handle on this aggressive wheel angle that these T300s have on them right out of the box. Obviously, the motor mount portion of this cockpit had no flex issues with the T300 mounted to it, but it also handled my Sim steering Kollmorgen motor with no problems. There was no movement whatsoever. This due to these massive corner brackets that JCL uses in the construction of the motor mount section. They really do a good job in keeping this top crossbar from flexing this way or this way. Very, very solid. Now, when I discovered that JCL is using their own proprietary 40 series profile, I was a bit concerned. I mean, you're going to have to buy all your extra parts solely from JCL. But as this build progressed, I realized that it really wasn't the showstopper that I first envisioned it to be. As it turns out, you can use standard 40 series profile, brackets, and T-nuts to add your own custom solutions to the existing JCL profile. Now, as you can see here, I'm using standard 40 series profile for my seat mount, and also standard 40 series T-nuts and brackets. And I had no problem mounting this to the JCL profile. And it's very, very securely mounted with that setup. You can see here I can really jerk on this and it's moving the cockpit but not the seat. And really, this whole cockpit is very, very solid. I cannot detect any flex anywhere. And any form of flex is really one of my personal pet peeves. I just don't like it. I want all of my control mounts to be rock solid. So, would I recommend you giving JCL a look if you're looking for an 80/20 cockpit? Well, when I first discovered that the 40 series profile in this kit was a custom solution, I would have said attentive yes if you fully understand that you can only customize your rig with parts sourced from JCL. But now that I know that you can mount industry standard 40 series profile with standard 40 series parts, I would have to change that recommendation to a yes. As once built, this meets all of my requirements for a rock solid, customizable cockpit. That's it for now. I'm Barry Rowland, and thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel.